Thanks, Nick. It's good to see you,
Good to
and
see you, man.
good to see some familiar faces here that I've gotten to know people around the way. And I've been in AA a long time. I was just thinking about it on the ride over here. I went to my first meeting when I was 18, and that was in 1995. And I went to it because I had a DUI, and it was I think with the DUI came like my eighth underage drinking. And this all happened. Like I got 8 underage drinkings in a year span. I got a DUI, and things kept getting worse, but I just thought I had bad luck. So that seemed to be the theme of my drinking for a long time. I always thought it wasn't a problem unless it was a problem for other people, but it wasn't necessarily a problem for me. But the consequences started getting worse. But they started when I was pretty young. So 18, I went to for my first DUI. I had to go to weekends at the Bucks County Work Release. It wasn't the jail, but it was the Work Release Center, and they had DUI meetings there, and they had AA meetings there. And the woman that ran the program was listening to a little bit of my story and why I was there. And I was just saying it was bad luck, a one-time thing. It won't happen again. I've learned my lesson. And she was like, "You really scare me. Like, you're the type of person that really needs to listen. You really need to pay attention. Like, I think you're an alcoholic already." And I was like, you have no idea what you're talking about. Like, I just like to have a good time. I just happen to do stupid stuff when I'm drinking. But otherwise, like, I'm doing pretty well. And so much has happened over the years. That was 30 years ago. It's kind of hard to believe. And I'm coming up on 11 years sober. I'll have 11 years March 21st. So my sobriety date is March 21st of 2013. So between 1995 and 2013, a lot of stuff happened. A lot of stuff happened. And I think that lady was right. She hit the nail on the head. She was good at her job. So, I mean, for me, when I was young, life was good. I was pretty confident. I was always like, I don't know, kind of, I had self-confidence. I was happy. I did well in school. I was a pretty good athlete. I came from a good family. I didn't have any problems. It's not like the first time that I took a drink, it was a spiritual awakening. I've heard people say like they were shy and kind of, or they were troubled or whatever. And when they first took a drink, it was like, they came alive. For me, it really wasn't like that. It became that later on. But in the beginning, for me, the first time I took a drink, I was 13 years old. I was on a skiing trip with my older sister and a bunch of her friends. And I remember like getting drunk. And it was like I was already okay, but it was like now I was like, I just loved the feeling of getting drunk. And I was like, I'm going to do this with my little gang of derelict friends as often as I can. And like I went back and like reported to them that there's this thing called alcohol, and like we got to get into it like often. So and we did, and we'd get drunk and we'd pass out in the woods and we'd throw up all over the place. And I hung out with these guys. One of them's dead. He was a real alcoholic, and he and I rode this thing. I barely made it out. He did not make it out, but we had like 6 or 7 other really good buddies that looked just like us. And at a certain point in time, way later on, probably in my mid-20s, they were able to just kind of regulate. They were like, we're getting older now. A couple of them had gotten DUIs. A couple of them got in relationships. A couple of them were like, I got to get serious about my career. And they were able to peel off. And it was kind of weird because I always thought either we're all alcoholic or none of us are alcoholic, So I'm just going to see what happens here. And it ended up that I was alcoholic and they were hard drinkers. And if anybody knows in the big book what that looks like, it took me a long time to find out what it really meant to be an alcoholic. But when I pick up a drink, I really have no control, ever. And I never did. And I didn't know that that was like a problem. I thought if you didn't drink like I did, you were just somebody that I didn't necessarily want to hang out with. I wanted to hang around with people that wanted to drink all night long. The point was to drink until there's nothing left, and to wake up and start doing it again, or any other substance, powdered, capsuled, injectable, anything, became an option as my disease progressed. And I just kind of thought that ride would end at some point, and I would be like some of my buddies and get off of it, and then get back into life, and then continue a sober life and get a family and finish school and all that stuff. And it didn't happen for me because I am an alcoholic. I can't control the amount that I take, and my disease progressed to the point where I couldn't stay sober based on my own power. So I would drink and party, get into trouble. To fast forward for time just because of time. My life fell apart over a period of time. It was like it's like a storm kind of rolled in, and I couldn't really see the clouds coming until the storm was already on me. And by that time, I had dropped out of school. I was going to school. When I wasn't drinking, I became an emotional wreck. I didn't know how to hang out with people. I didn't know how to interact socially. I was massively depressed, and I was a recluse. I just kind of hid out in my room. Except for when I drank, it became kind of my access to freedom from this place inside of myself. And I didn't know what was going on with me. I was kind of scared to tell people that, I think I'm possibly going crazy. And also, the only thing that gives me freedom is drugs and alcohol. And I didn't know that was alcoholism. I kind of had this notion that this isn't going to end well, but I don't know how to stop it, and I'm too scared to face it. So let me just try my best to mix in with other people and try to drink at the appropriate times, which for me was every night after 5 o'clock, and blend in with other people. But that became every day at noon, and then eventually became every morning, and then eventually became other substances, and then eventually became, my entire life became a search for freedom from the bondage of self. I found myself in a state of mind, a state of spirit, just a state of being sober that was so intolerable that my life became revolved around not experiencing sobriety 100% of the time. So I had to drink and do other substances 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and get money to supply these substances. But since I was on these substances, I couldn't work, so I had to do a bunch of illegal things. And I ended up in places I never would have imagined. I mean, I come from Buckingham, and at a certain point in time, I was living in the woods. I was walking the streets of Kensington and Trenton, and I became just like a shell of a human being existing basically to not feel, because I didn't know how to do that. And I became a slave to substances. And that eventually landed me in and out of rehabs, disconnected with my family. They weren't in my life anymore. And that's a whole, I could talk for about an hour about all that and the reparation that's been done in sobriety. And I was in jail for a period of time, and I came out and I thought, I'm really going to do it this time. I've been in and out of meetings before. I've been to plenty of meetings. I would have little pockets of sobriety after rehab, usually for about 12 to 15 days, before I just couldn't handle the feelings inside of being sober. And I would start to go to meetings, and people would tell me, keep coming back, kid, it's going to get better. And I'm like, I don't know how you can sit in your own skin and wait for it to get better. I want to believe you, but I can't experience this body and this mind and this the suffering that's going on inside of me unless something radical happens pretty quickly. And it started to make me think that maybe I didn't have alcoholism, that I had possibly alcoholism, but also like some sort of mental and emotional diagnosis that they hadn't found a name for yet. And that when they did, they might, I did, because there was a certain period of time where I had a little bit of length of, for me, what I called sobriety. And what that looks like is I was on Suboxone, Adderall, and antidepressants, but I wasn't abusing anything that often. And that lasted for like 4 years, which was pretty good. Like I was able to get a job. I was able to go to meetings, and I was able to like somewhat mimic a human being, to some extent, which was better than what I was doing. But in that time, I was going to a therapist that was giving me medication. I was going to a therapist or a doctor that was giving me the Suboxone. I was going to AA meetings almost every day. I was going to outpatient, and I was going to a therapist to talk to. And so it was full-time recovery, and I was getting worse. And so I'm in the middle of AA, and around year 3, I had hope the first 2 years. I'll get off this medication. My life's getting a little bit better. I'm kind of like, I feel like things are trending in the right direction. But I'm like waiting, but I'm not feeling good. I'm still depressed. I'm still totally wacky. I'm still like, my relationships are a mess. I'm fighting with my family all the time. I can't save money. I have all these like weird side addictions that are just strange. I was like, I got addicted to like buying sneakers, and I didn't really have the money to do that. So it was just like, it was really strange. And I was dating, women that had boyfriends, or they were married, and I didn't really have a conscience. So it wasn't the best. And I wanted to be a better person. I wanted to feel better, but I just didn't know how. And so I was holding out hope that eventually that I would achieve that if I continued to go to these programs and continued to go to AA and continued to work on myself. And I was getting worse around year 3. So I started to contemplate like, yeah, I'm definitely, with all these doctors and these medications and going to AA and everything, I've got alcoholism. And that's when I really considered that I probably had something that's unidentifiable, like a unique brand of screwed upness that hadn't been diagnosed yet. And that's when I started to get suicidal again. I was suicidal in my addiction. That's another story. It didn't work out, obviously. But I started to get suicidal again, and I knew it was a very kind of like a real option. But I thought, well, let me drink first. And if that doesn't work, whatever that means, then maybe I'll consider, the other option. And I drank, and immediately I got into some kind of a fight and got arrested, and a disorderly conduct or something. But I was like, this is just going to keep happening. I'll go back to AA. I'll give it one more shot. And when I got back into AA, I came across a friend of mine, and he knew me since high school. And he had moved out of the area, and he came back, and he was doing really well. And he looked different, and so I asked him, like, what's going on? And he said, I got to show you. He said, I met this guy, and he does these like 12 steps in a day workshops, and he takes them all over the place. And he said, why don't you come to one? Why don't you just come? And I was like, 12 steps in a day? Like, if I knew the number to the AA police, I would call him on this guy, like, because you can't do that. Like that's, you got to wait, because the meetings I was going to were basically, and, I'm not trying to tell anybody how to do whatever. This is just my story and what worked for me and my path. But I was going to meetings at a time in a place where it was basically like, come to the meetings, there's steps on the wall, and I would hear them, but they weren't like, they kind of faded into the back, and then it came about like what people were sharing and the problems of the day. And I would hear all different things. I'd go to these beginner meetings, and it was like, how did you stay sober today? And tell the group. And one person would say, I stayed sober today. I went to the gym, I prayed, and I called my sponsor. And so I'd like kind of like mentally be like, okay, pray, call your sponsor. The next guy would say like, I went for a walk in the woods. I wrote a gratitude list, and I came to a meeting. Okay, well, do that. The next guy would say like, well, it was a real rough week, but I brought my ass to a meeting in a wheelbarrow when it felt like it was going to fall off. And I'm like, bring ass to a meeting, ass falls off, put it in a wheelbarrow. So I'm hearing all these things. And when I met this guy that did the 12-step workshop, he was very clear. And he said, why do you think you drink? And I said, because I'm alcoholic. And he said, well, what does that mean? And I said, well, it means I drink too much. And he said, yeah, that's part of it. And he said, but why do you drink? Like, what is it? And I said, I'm just like so effed up on the inside. That it's the only thing in my entire search in life that's ever even sort of touched that spot and soothed it. And he said, well, that's alcoholism. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, you're treating your alcoholism with alcohol. And I was like, what? So this empty space inside of me that I've been trying to describe to doctors for years. And they've told me I have an anxiety disorder and massive depression and possibly some other stuff. And there doesn't seem to be any solution to it. Is alcoholism? And he said, yeah. And the 12 steps treat that. They go into that. And if a guy like you doesn't apply your whole heart to these steps, you're probably going to die. And I knew he was right. I would have died at my own hands, or would have drank and used myself to death. And it wasn't far off. So the way he was talking, I knew he was right. Or else, if I had suspected there was any chink in his armor, or he wasn't telling me the truth, or he didn't know what he was talking about, I just would have been out the door, because I had talked to so many people and been in so many institutions and tried so many different things over the years. But it's like truth knows truth. You don't have to explain it. I knew it. And I surrendered to that guy at that moment. And I did everything he said. If he said to pray, I prayed to a God I didn't believe in and said, please reveal yourself to me. If he said write, I wrote. If he said go make amends, I went and I made amends. If he said we're meeting at this time, I was there early. And this is against every possible way that I had ever approached any other area of my life. I was late, I lied, I didn't show up, I didn't do the work, and screw you. In this instance, I did the opposite. And all I can say is it was like the powers that be were like, this guy's ready. And I had like a small opening, and I took massive amounts of action while that opening was there. And I'm still in that space. 11 years ago, I surrendered to a program that I had no idea where it was headed, to a guy I had just met. And I found a space that it's like just between the gaps of life that I can live in. I don't have a fancy job. I don't have a ton of money. I don't have many materialistic things. But by living this strange way of life and helping other people, the guy told me a long time ago, I started to get well, and I thought, uh-oh, because I had assumed that I was going to die at some point before I had to take care of the massive amounts of financial, relationship, legal damage that was my life. I mean, it was not good. And I said, well, what about this heaping pile of crap that's my life? I don't know what to do with this. It's so overwhelming. And he said, look, I'm going to tell you, I think your purpose was to go through some really, really tough times inside yourself and outside yourself. And to find a way to recover from that through these steps in this program and start there, just go help people. Don't worry about this mess. And he said, I promise, if you just do this wholeheartedly, like keep it simple for me. If you try to tell me anything too big, I get so overwhelmed. And it's, still true to this day. But if I said, like, tell me what to do. What do I do? Wake up, meditate, pray. Take a good chunk of time in the morning and do that. Dedicate yourself to it. From there, watch yourself all day and pray. Watch for this fear. Watch for this anxiety. Talk to me. Call me. Tell me when your mind gets crazy. All right? And I just did it. I did it like they say we don't do this perfectly. I've done it perfectly. And I don't mean that it's been perfect. I just mean I can't not do it. It's too scary for me not to live this way, like with all of my heart. So do I do it well? Not always, but I do it. And I mess up and all that stuff. But as I began to meditate, pray, and watch myself, I started to go out and make amends. I started to naturally be able to engage with my family at a deeper level. I naturally started to be able to show up at my job and become somebody that they could count on. I naturally started to be able to call financial people instead of a payment plan. Naturally started to be able to walk into a bank, have a conversation with a teller, and open up a bank account. I naturally started to be able to do these things that I couldn't do before. And over a period of time, it just transformed. All those areas of my life transformed. And it's not to say that it's perfect. But I don't know how it happened. It's like it happened while I wasn't looking. And it's the strangest thing, and it still happens to this day. But the weirdest thing is I get better, if that's the right word, more still, more at peace, more there's a voice in my head that used to be there, and it would be I don't want to curse, but that's how it talked to me. It would be you effing piece of, you're a real piece of garbage, and you're weak, you're scared, you little shit, you fucked up your life. What are you going to do now? Oh, you're going to try to get sober? Good luck. It's not going to work for you. This really nasty voice. And it assumed that everybody else was thinking the same. It was just they say that the root of alcoholism is selfishness and self-centeredness. So if that's the root, and I hated myself, how could I be selfish and self-centered? So I remember telling my sponsor that. And he said, well, how often do you think about how much you hate yourself? And I was if there's a percentage greater than 100, it's that. And he was like, do you think that's self-centered? And I said, well, if you're going to be technical, I guess it is. And so I know that as I applied this program, that identification with that voice started to dissipate. And I always thought I was what my mind told me. But my mind doesn't really say too much anymore. And in the gap where my mind starts to tell me who and what I am just here and perfectly at peace. And over the years, I feel like I'm just swimming around in this like super gentle, super peaceful, like wonderful, easy world, inside myself and outside of myself. And at the rare times that the storm kicks up in here, I'm on it. Like, I call somebody, I'm always working with somebody or sponsoring somebody, or so I don't like think really too much anymore about like, well, what's going to happen or what's it going to. I'm just like, well, that's not, that voice isn't saying that, so it's like, okay, now, and if the next moment comes, then I'm sure that'll be okay too, because there'll be nothing there to say, you better be scared about something. You better, you know, there's danger 10 years down the road or 3 years down the road. Or it's crazy like how often you use the present moment as a stepping stone. It's like an obstacle to like a future. And you can do that all day. Like you're in the shower, but you're thinking about like, goddamn boss, what's he going to say today? And then you get to the boss and he says whatever. And then it's like, oh, now I got to go. You know, what's 10 minutes down the road? What's an hour down the road? What's, you know, and like all that for me, when I was in my like worst case alcoholism, was just, it was just so much noise in there. I knew that I had a spiritual awakening one time when this is going to sound corny, but whatever. I was sitting on my back deck, and I used to just like be on all kinds of stuff and like smoke cigarettes and just like think. I would just be thinking. Or I'd be coming down from something or hungover, and I would just think of like what a horrible, awful life I had and what a piece of crap I was, and like thoughts. And I remember like at some point through the steps right around my amends, I was sitting on that porch and I heard like two birds, distinctively, one chirping and another one answering. And that was my first real big spiritual awakening, because I was like, dude, have they always been doing that? You know what I mean? Like, I couldn't experience anything except for me-ness. And it sucked. And so that's alcoholism. And alcohol is freedom from the bondage of all that noise and all that pain. And it makes perfect sense that I was looking for a synthetic spiritual awakening in alcohol and drugs. And it worked really well for a period of time. But I needed an authentic spiritual experience. I needed an authentic spiritual awakening. These guys that, you know, Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob knew this. They had that experience. And when I applied it fully, God, you know, I recovered. And I love the effect produced by the recovery. So like, I plan on continuing to do it every day until the end. Anyway, thanks.